conversation with a Kol younger man exactly 30 years ago. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I want to acknowledge that I don't remember every conversation that I had with everybody for the past 30 years, and I can tell you exactly when the conversation was. I can't. The reason I can remember this conversation, it was because that was the year that my first book came out, B'ezras Practical Steps to Success in Marriage, and the conversation was about the book. Now, this Kol younger man had not bought the book, unfortunately, and he hadn't even read the book, but he saw the advertisement about the book. So when I met him, he said, "Oh, I see you came up with a new book." I said, "Yes. What's it about?" So I told him it's about preparation for marriage and hadracha for chasanim and kalas before they get married. And he said, "Oh, you know, that's like a very good subject. It's a very important subject." Okay, I was curious where he was coming from. And he shared with me that he had previously been married. He was currently married to his second wife. And he says, "You know, I'll tell you the truth. Even though I'm very happily married now, and I think getting along well with his current wife," he said, "to be quite honest with you, I think if I wasn't such a hothead when I married my first wife, I might still be married to her today." That was a shocking revelation. Share with me. And I asked him to explain himself, and he said that there were some issues when he first got married. He was impatient. He ran off to the Beis Din after the first few weeks, and a couple of months later, the marriage was over. Now, he was happily married to his second wife, and certainly was beshed that he should marry her, I'm sure, but he confided in me that he had been somewhat impulsive and impatient and rushed to judgment in ending his first marriage. And had he not been so impatient and in such a rush, he acknowledged to me that he probably would have still been married to her and would have been able to work it out, because it wasn't that serious and it wasn't that insoluble problems that he was facing in his first marriage. So the topic this evening for both sides is the importance and the necessity of not rushing to judgment in general, and especially in your relationship with your spouse in marriage. Now, of course, Chazal understood this thousands of years ago, and we don't have to look any further than the very first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which addresses this topic. Mishnah begins, the famous Mishnah, we're all familiar with it. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai, Masal Yoshua, Yoshua was a Canaan, was a Canaan with the Nevi'im, Masal Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. Haim Amru Shlosha Devarim. Some of Horshim say this refers to the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, and some say it refers to all of them, who were previously mentioned. They said three things. Obviously, they said more than three things, but they were especially known for three things that they emphasized. What were the three things? Avu Masunim Badin, the Amidah Tamidim Harbe, Asu the Torah. Three things. But the very first thing that's mentioned is Havu Masunim Badin. Don't rush to judgment. Now, Pirkei Avos is filled with important, necessary insights in our relationship in El Chavero, certainly Ben Ish Ishto, Midas Tovos. But if Chazal chose this as the first Mishnah, and of the three things that the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah were known for to say, this was the very first one mentioned, then obviously we have to understand that there's a tremendous chashivas placed on this message, and we have to understand it fully. And Vu Masun Badin means do not rush to judgment. Now, I just want to share with you what the Reb Meir says in this Mishnah. He says, "L'morim hara, u'leposkim hara, u'leposkim esadim." They said this to those who teach halacha, paskin halacha, and paskin judgments. Now, you might think, okay, that refers to dayanim. We're not dayanim, so I guess this doesn't apply to us, right? Well, I think that's wrong, because there isn't a single husband that this doesn't apply to. Every husband is paskin halacha in his home, and every person, every spouse, is making judgments. Judgments about what someone else said, what they meant, what their intention was, what their motivation was. We're judging people all the time. And some of Mepharshim say this does refer to everybody and not just dayanim, and that's why it's in the first mission. That's why it's the first thing mentioned in the first mission. So it applies to all of us, because we're always making judgments. We're passing judgments on other people, on their actions, on what they say, and what we think they meant. And what does Reb Meir say? The Baal Yitu B'shikol Hadas, that you shouldn't make a mistake in your evaluation. Ki ha'adam ha'maher l'hairos, because if someone is quick to paskin, shoots from the hip, makes a judgment right away, too quickly, Nikra Posheya, he's called a transgressor, a sinner. Afal pi shechishev lomar as emes, even though he thinks he's doing the right thing. We all think we're doing the right thing. We think everything's always l'shem shemayim, and we're judging correctly. Okay. Nevertheless, afal pi shechishev lomar as emes, ein zeh shogeg. This is not considered. The mistake that a person makes when he rushes to judgment. I don't know, he made a mistake. He was too quick. He shots up exactly the situation correctly. All right, made a mistake. Reb Meir says that's not called a shogeg. That's not an innocent error. Ach karav lemezid. It's as if someone intentionally did the wrong thing. Asher lo nasan belavav lomar levav nemarim lo yobin nadas. That he didn't take it to heart, that the mind that's quick to judgment is going to make a mistake. Ki atos b'chol adam matzui, because everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and we have to understand that we're not perfect. We don't always see things clearly. So, how do we apply this to our family life, to our relationship with B'nai Bayis, to our spouses in marriage? It means that when your spouse does something or says something, before you respond and you make a judgment about what they said and what they meant and what their intention was, then you should pause, you should wait. Now, the advice that I often give to the couples that I work with is that if your communication with your spouse is not optimum and is not effective, that you're not going to be able to resolve differences that we all have with our spouses. We're not going to resolve them effectively. And it's going to create more problems rather than solving them. And we're always trying to work things out and to improve our relationship with our spouses. But in order to do that, we have to communicate effectively. And one of the tools that I often recommend in the couples that I work with is what I call the 24-hour rule. Now, what's the 24-hour rule? 24-hour rule states that when you're having a discussion a problem-solving session. You're trying to work something out. You're having an important discussion on maybe a controversial subject where there's disagreement between husband and wife. And your spouse just said something that you disagree with, you disapprove of, or is factually wrong and incorrect. But you're having this discussion about a very serious matter. That you need to wait 24 hours before you respond. Now, that's not always possible. If you're having a discussion about whether you take the bus or you call the car service and the bus is coming in 10 minutes, and you got to either take a car service or get on the bus, you don't have time to wait 24 hours to go back and forth. Obviously, it's not possible in every situation. But there are plenty of situations. If you're discussing where to go on vacation, where to send the kids to yeshiva, to Beis Yaakov, whether to go to your parents' for Yontif or your spouse's parents' for Yontif. These long-term plans that can sometimes be very tense and sometimes can be stressful. And there is time to go back and forth. That it's always best, whenever possible, I'm not saying it's always possible, but whenever possible, to wait 24 hours before you respond, before you answer back, before you give your opinion. Now, why is that necessary? It's necessary for a few reasons. First of all, if someone is talking about something that they have very strong feelings about to their spouse, and immediately the spouse corrects them, contradicts them, refutes them, proves them to be wrong, no one feels heard that way. How long did you consider what I had to say before you shot back and told me what an idiot I am, how foolish I am, how wrong I am? So I don't feel heard. If you wait 24 hours and then you come back to me and tell me how I'm wrong, I'm more willing to listen to you because I know at least you considered what I had to say. If I did something that upset you, and I apologized, or I didn't apologize, and you want to comment on it, wait 24 hours. 24 hours, you can criticize, you can correct, but allowing that 24-hour gap between what you heard, or what you saw, or what happened, and your reaction can go a very, very long way towards improving your shalom bayis. I want to cite an example, a couple that I was working with a number of years ago. This is an older couple. They were, I think, in their late 50s, early 60s. Now, to tell you the truth, today I don't consider a couple in their 50s or 60s an older couple. But this was quite a while ago when I was maybe in my 40s, or must have been not much more than that. And to me, in my 40s, a couple in their 50s is an older couple. And not only did I consider them an older couple, but I was very, a little bit intimidated by the fact that an older couple was consulting me, a younger man, about their marriage. Now, they weren't old enough to be my parents, but they were still at least 10, 15 years older than me. And I remember at the time being a little bit maybe intimidated by the fact that they were older and impressed that they were willing to come to see a younger man to discuss their marital issues. And I remember when they first came, they told me they were married about 30 years, I think, at the time. So I asked them, we're having some difficulties, and how long is it going on? Whole marriage, they've been squabbling back and forth. So I asked them the obvious question. I said, you're married 30 years. I'm the first therapist you see. What made you come now, after 30 years? What prompted you to, all of a sudden, after 30 years, you wake up and decide you're coming now? So the husband had said, I'll tell you the truth. I didn't think that we had such serious problems. Me and my wife, we got along, everybody's ups and downs, no one's marriage is perfect. It was okay. And I think his 2 older children were married already. He had 1 child still single, a daughter in her early 20s, and she was working, she had her own car, and sometimes she went to friends for Shabbos, and sometimes she stayed home. So he met her in the morning in the hallway, as he was going into the bathroom, coming out of the bathroom. He met his daughter in the hallway, and he said to her, "By the way, are you going to be with us this Shabbos?" It was a Thursday morning or Wednesday morning, whatever it was. And she said, "Yes, unfortunately." He was very taken aback. His daughter was planning to be home for Shabbos, unfortunately. He always loved it when she came. He was home for Shabbos. He enjoyed her company and loved her dearly, and was very happy whenever she would be home for Shabbos. If she was away, he understood it, but he was happy when she came home for Shabbos. So he was very taken aback by that comment, and he said to her, "What do you mean, unfortunately?" So she said to him, "Well, the way you and Mommy are always fighting, it's not so pleasant to be at home, but I had no other place to go, so I guess I'm going to be home for Shabbos." Ooh, that hit him home. That hit home. The way me and my wife are fighting makes my daughter feel she doesn't want to be home for Shabbos. She'd rather find some other place to go for Shabbos. And he said to himself, if that's the case, then maybe the problems between him and his wife really are more serious than he thought. And he decided he's going to come. Now his wife had asked him many times to come for marriage counseling, and he didn't think it was necessary. And he didn't think the problem was that serious. So he always poo-pooed it, pushed her off, and he wasn't interested. But after this episode with his daughter, he realized, maybe there's something here, and maybe we better take care of this. And I don't want my daughter to feel that she doesn't want to be home for Shabbos with the parents. So I started working with them, and we were working on their communication with each other. And I was coaching them on speaking more effectively with each other. And one of the things that I was teaching them is the 24-hour rule. And after a few months, they had really made some terrific headway with each other, and it resolved some major sticking points between the two of them. And they felt they had really come a long way and resolved a lot of their conflicts and decided they wanted to end. And as I often do, when couples or even individuals that I'm working with decide they want to end the therapy, I always recommend that we have a final session to wrap things up, pull things together, and it's a way of kind of being kind of all the work that we've done. And I compare it to a siyum, like a hadran. This review will take one session, review the work that we've done, and then we'll end that way. And they said, fine, absolutely. And I asked them to think about what we accomplished, what we did, and what they learned. So at the final session, we usually review the work that we've done. I compare it to a siyum, like we say the hadran, meaning to review, to go back over the work that we've done. It's a way of being kind of the lessons that they've learned and evaluate what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, and so on. So we had a final session with this couple, and I was asking them what the experience was like during the marriage counseling, and they both said it was difficult at first, and it was hard to learn to communicate differently after 30 years of marriage. Of course, it's not easy to learn new tricks, so to speak, but they applied themselves and tried to follow the rules and worked on the issues as the way I had taught them, and then I asked them what they thought about what they had learned. They commented on it. And then when the husband was speaking, he said to me, and the thing that I think was most valuable about the work we did with you, this is why I wanted to mention this case, this couple, he said, was that 24-hour rule. I found it was so difficult. When my wife was speaking, she said something, I wanted to correct her, I wanted to comment, to answer back, to defend myself, whatever it was. And I found it was so hard to hold that back. But I knew it was something I had to do. And you had told us this was important, and I wanted to follow the rules. It was very, very difficult. But I see now how valuable that was. For 3 reasons, I said. Number one, as you had said, and I told them, the speaker doesn't feel heard if they get answered back, corrected, criticized right away. So the speaker feels heard when the listener doesn't answer right away and waits 24 hours. He said, that's true. But there's another 2 reasons why I found that the 24-hour rule was so helpful. One is that things that I thought were very serious matters that I had to bring up right away. The next day, I realized that wasn't so important. Maybe I don't even have to mention it. I don't have to get into it. Yesterday it seemed like such a burning matter, but now I went back after I slept on it. It wasn't that important. That was one reason. And the 3rd reason, in addition to making the speaker feel heard and realize maybe it wasn't so important, if I decided it was important, and I wanted to correct my wife, and I wanted to disagree with something she said, the intensity of my feeling was not so strong a day later. And I think if I had answered right away, like I used to, before I came here and you told us not to do that, had I spoken to my wife the old way, right away, shooting from the hip, that I would have been much harsher. Maybe I would have said things that I would regret, and I certainly would have been nastier. But when I had to wait 24 hours before I could respond, my tone was softer, my voice wasn't raised as loudly. And I saw that when my wife and I would not respond immediately to each other, and we had to wait 24 hours before we could respond, that made all the difference in the world. So what he was really telling me, and I'm sharing with you, is again what Chazal have taught us. When it comes to making judgments about something a spouse did or said, or a comment or a position that they hold, or an opinion that they have, before you make a judgment, make an evaluation, and comment on it, it's helpful if you can wait 24 hours and respond the next day. Then you have shikul hadas, and you're not as intense, and your spouse will be more likely to listen and hear you if you're responding a day later than right on the spot. So I want to wish everybody a Ksiva Tova, and the next Vaad, B'ezras Hashem, will not be in 4 weeks, it'll be in 3 weeks, because the Yontif schedule works out better to be in 3 weeks, which will be September 16th, and I hope B'ezras Hashem will see you all back then.